A high school student accidentally travels into the world of a novel, becoming a cannon fodder female supporting character who dies at the beginning. How can she break the deadlock and reverse her predetermined fate? Today, we bring you a transmigration series. Why Raelina ended up at the Duke's mansion. The female protagonist in her previous life was named Raelina Maymill, a senior in her third year of high school. After finally getting into her dream university, she was suddenly pushed down the stairs by a mysterious person. When she woke up again, she had entered the novel's world, becoming the cannon fodder female character, Raelina. Her original parents were healthy, and her sister was also very cute. Because they were involved in the oil business, they were very wealthy, becoming a newly elevated baronial family. Such a life of glory and wealth would make anyone laugh in their dreams, but Raelina couldn't laugh at all because she was the cannon fodder female character who was poisoned by her fiancé and died tragically at a young age. Her fiancé, named French, planned to swindle the oil business from her parents after killing the original character, and was eventually exposed by the protagonist who returned from studying abroad. Now, Raelina's life was at stake, and she couldn't just sit back and wait for death. However, French's family was a prestigious noble family, and this marriage contract was not something she could easily dissolve if she wanted to. So, in order to achieve her goal, Raelina bought a book on how to break up and studied it carefully. No matter how she humiliated French, or even aimed a gun at him, he just smiled and didn't take it seriously. Eventually, Raelina confessed her thoughts, stating that she did not like him. Hearing this, French suddenly laughed and told Raelina that her family was just nouveau riche and had no right to dissolve the marriage contract. So, no matter what, she would have to marry him. This despicable attitude disgusted Raelina, and she wished she could find an opportunity to get rid of him. Just then, she met the original male protagonist, also a duke of the country named Winet. Now, with capitalism thriving in the kingdom, the old nobility, in order to prevent merchants from crossing class boundaries and becoming the new nobility, thus undermining their interests, specifically issued a decree prohibiting the sale of titles. However, the imperial seal needed to enact the law had been stolen and its whereabouts were unknown. Thus, to suppress the new nobility, the old nobility pushed Winet to the forefront. Suddenly, an idea flashed in Raelina's mind, thinking that if it were the duke, he might be able to stop French. After making up her mind, Raelina got up and followed him. This was her first meeting with the male protagonist. Although he was handsome and well-mannered, she knew the original story too well. This person was actually a devil. She told Winet that she came to make a deal because she knew the whereabouts of the imperial seal. Meanwhile, on the other side, French was called away by a person named Jake, who threatened him to keep Raelina close, or else he would suffer. Since French was in Jake's hands, he had to obey. He originally thought Raelina was easy to manipulate, but recently she seemed like a completely different person, which made him very angry. When he came to the garden to find Raelina, he happened to interrupt their conversation. Seeing this, Raelina stepped forward and grabbed Winet, falsely claiming that they had already communicated their intentions. Winet, for the sake of the imperial seal, also played along very cooperatively, even stopping French's violent actions when he was about to make a move. French left in a fury, stating that he wouldn't let go easily. After he left, Winet instructed his subordinates to conduct a detailed investigation on Raelina. In addition, they were to keep a close watch on French and deal with any suspicious actions immediately. The next day, Raelina was woken up by a maid, but after a night of heavy drinking, she really didn't want to get up. Then she heard from the maid that her parents were not at home, and that she, as the eldest daughter, had to receive the uninvited duke. Both of them wore social smiles on their faces, and to those unaware, it seemed as if they were truly involved. However, Winet's visit this time implicitly showed his stance, which was good news for Raelina. So, she immediately went to the bookstore to buy a book on contract law, preparing the groundwork for signing a cooperation agreement. That evening, when her parents learned of the duke's visit, they asked Raelina what was going on. Raelina candidly told them that she did not like French, and that her previous agreement to engage him was only for the family's benefit. But now, she only wanted to be with the person she loved. She thought her parents would disagree, but to her surprise, they quickly consented and were relieved that she had her own thoughts. This made Raelina feel complicated, as she was not their real daughter. The next day, she went to the duke's mansion to negotiate, and told Winet that the jade seal sought by the old nobility was actually in his hands, because he outwardly supported the old nobility but was secretly the king's right-hand man. To Raelina's surprise, despite her straightforwardness, Winet still played dumb and even told her to leave, not to waste her own time. Just as she was troubled, she suddenly remembered the chessboard in the room and immediately pointed out that it symbolized the current situation of the kingdom. Raelina's sudden remark piqued Winet's interest, and he decided to make a deal with her. Seeing the contract draft stated that they would pretend to be fiancés and nothing else, Winet was puzzled and asked her why. Seeing him persistently inquire, Raelina couldn't reveal it was because of the plot, and could only tell him she had heard rumors of French wanting to kill her, from the same source as the Jade Seal. Winet was still curious about the source of the information, but Raelina was already quite impatient, stating that if he refused to cooperate, she would sell the information to his political enemies. However, Winet was not worried at all, since those people were very suspicious and would not believe such baseless rumors. Raelina urged him not to haggle anymore, to sign now and part ways in 6 months, and she would never appear before him again. Winet promptly signed the contract, but during this ongoing drama, if he needed Raelina's cooperation, she had to comply. Soon after, French's family publicly condemned Raelina for breaking off the engagement and demanded a huge amount of compensation. In addition, Winet sent Adam to be her personal knight. Officially, it was for her safety, but in reality, he was there to monitor her. However, Adam was also a male supporting character in the original story. Previously, when the kingdom had a child soldier policy, Adam was one of them. After the policy was abolished and he had nowhere to go, Winet took him in, and he became a confidant of the Duke. Due to his childhood experiences, he was taciturn, and Raelina, trying to make conversation, found him barely able to utter a word, which made her quite frustrated. The maid was very concerned about Raelina's safety, because of Adam's notorious nickname as Death, and those ominous red eyes that seemed ready to kill at any moment. But Raelina said Adam was a national hero, and told the maid not to judge a book by its cover. Later, in the garden, her sister brought her blessings, hoping she would have a harmonious marriage with the Duke. But the wish balloon got stuck in the tree branches. Her sister was very sad, thinking that the gods would not hear her wishes if it continued like this. Just then, Adam suddenly cut off the branch, and seeing the balloon rise, her sister cheered up and gave him some chocolate as a thank you. Seeing Adam react differently than usual, Raelina asked if he liked sweets. Receiving an affirmative answer, she suddenly found Adam very cute and stuffed a bag of chocolates into his hands, asking him to take good care of her from now on because she had promised Winet to undergo bride training at the Duke's house. So, not long after, Raelina said goodbye to her family and moved into the Duke's mansion. She didn't expect that the first lesson upon arrival was a detailed introduction to the mansion by the butler, from the layout to the vases, almost as if he was going to go over the Duke's family tree in detail. This made Raelina return to her room and couldn't help but wonder if the bed she was sleeping on was also an antique, only to hear a voice say, "Don't worry, that bed isn't." To her surprise, it was Winet who had come uninvited into her room, which in modern times would have landed him in jail for a few days. Talking about the compensation demanded by French, Winet teased Raelina for her poor taste in men. Raelina smiled and asked, "If it wasn't bad, would I have chosen you as a partner?" But since things had come to this point, there was no turning back, so Raelina asked Winet who else knew about the contract. Wanting to prepare her statements in advance, Winet said that besides them, only Adam and another person knew, leading Raelina to guess that this person must be the Duke's trusted adjutant. To play the part of a couple, Raelina asked Winet to call her by her name. But when it was her turn, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Winet, cunning as he was, insisted until she did it, frustrating Raelina so much that she threw a pillow in anger. Winet, watching from outside the door, found this very amusing and asked Adam what he thought of her. Adam said Raelina was a strange person, which surprised Winet because for Adam, this was quite a compliment. In the following days, Raelina underwent various training sessions in the mansion. Fortunately, the original owner's body had muscle memory, which made it not too difficult for her. However, the difference in class meant a difference in education level, and mathematics was a major challenge for the original owner. But for Raelina, who had just finished her college entrance exams before transmigrating. It was very easy. Other than being a bit boring, it was quite relaxed for her. While Raelina was sitting by the window daydreaming, Winet suddenly came over with a bouquet of roses and asked her why she was working so hard on her bride training when they had agreed to be a contract couple. Raelina wished she could smash the flowers in his face. Couldn't she just love learning? Besides, there was nothing else to do here but study. Hearing this, Winet asked her to accompany him to a ball that evening to announce their engagement, and he had already arranged the engagement ceremony for next week. Raelina was annoyed by his unilateral decisions but felt helpless. Just as she was getting ready, Winet called someone in. He was named Nick, a makeup artist. Under his skilled hands, Raelina was transformed. Not only were her dark circles gone, but her skin was as smooth as a porcelain doll's. Just like that, the two became good friends. However, Nick told Raelina that smiling is very important in social situations. Among them, the Winet smile is very famous. It's the kind of smile that looks cheerful on the face but is full of disdain inside. Nick thinks this is not good, so he customized a smile for Raelina. The essence of it is when seeing someone you dislike, it captures the complex feeling of wanting to kill them but needing to remain polite. Subconsciously, Raelina thought of French and instantly mastered the knack for it. As evening arrived, Raelina stepped out of her room and asked Adam if it looked good. Seeing him silent, she wasn't surprised at all. She turned and left with the butler without knowing that Adam was actually stunned. Winet's reaction was also subtle. Seeing Raelina's elaborate dress, he got up and left without saying a word. Raelina was speechless. Was he even too lazy to make small talk? But the butler said he was just shy. Raelina absolutely didn't believe it. She thought this reason was terrible. She would rather believe that Winet was just too lazy to talk. Soon, they arrived at the ball in a carriage. Before even entering, Winet warned Raelina not to stray from his sight for more than 5 minutes. Looking back, she saw a group of knights following them, which left her speechless. How paranoid could this man be? Upon entering the venue, they immediately became the center of attention. Many men came over to invite Raelina to dance, but Winet blocked them all. Everyone thought he was jealous, but only Raelina knew that this man was pretending to be affectionate. Winet then invited Raelina to dance. Watching the two whirl around the dance floor, the crowd felt they were a perfect match. Little did they know, the seemingly harmonious atmosphere was actually filled with tension. It was a kind of tit-for-tat where if you insult me, I'll step on your foot. However, in the end, Winet was more skilled and finished the dance with a difficult move, successfully defeating Raelina. At the same time, the subtle glances from around them made Raelina uneasy, but there were too many people at the ball to tell who was watching her. Then, a red-haired woman appeared at the venue. She was called Vivian, the villainess from the original story, who, after being rejected by Winet, spitefully accepted the king's proposal to become the sole queen candidate and also the biggest stumbling block in the love story of the female lead in Winet. But now, Winet's fiancé was her, Raelina. Wasn't this bound to target her? Just as Raelina was about to slip away, Winet suddenly stopped her. It was said that the ladies of the old nobility had a private gathering which could even shake the nation. So, he asked Raelina to approach Vivian and Lady Freeze, the Marchioness, to get an invitation to the gathering. Raelina accepted the task, stating that by doing so, Winet would owe her a favor, which she would definitely claim back later. This no-loss character amused Winet greatly. Taking advantage of Freeze leaving the crowd, Raelina, carrying a glass of wine, walked over and pretended to bump into her, spilling wine on Freeze's hand and using this as an excuse to invite her to wash up. Unexpectedly, Vivian followed, blocking her attempt to take Freeze away while slyly mocking her lower status compared to Vivian's nobility. If she didn't mock back, it would be too humiliating. You mock my low status, I mock your inability to grasp a man's heart. Even if you like Winet, at least for now, he is my man. Vivian secretly cursed Raelina for not knowing humility, but Raelina simply retorted, saying that it was a new era where humility was not needed. In other words, calling Vivian an old antique. As the two confronted each other, Freeze was at a loss on the side. At this moment, Nick suddenly appeared. As a man, he didn't care about maintaining a ladylike demeanor and directly scolded Vivian as an annoying vixen, successfully drawing her hatred away. Raelina realized that Nick was helping her out of the situation and gave him a high five like a good buddy. She quickly took Freeze to wash her hands. Seeing the knights who had followed from afar, Freeze was very resistant. Raelina noticed this and asked Adam and the others to go back first, leaving only Ensley, a female knight. In the room, Raeliana's considerate and gentle manner made Freeze feel secure. She had only recently arrived in the capital and was following Vivian to break into the capital's social circle sooner. Learning that Raeliana also wanted to interact with the ladies but couldn't find a proper channel, Freeze invited her to a gathering. Raeliana secretly cheered in her heart, thinking that after completing the task, she must make Winet properly thank her. Unexpectedly, as soon as she opened the door, the room was engulfed in thick smoke. At the same time, a shadow appeared, who used a handkerchief to knock Raeliana unconscious and take her away. This person was none other than her former fiancé, French. Although French belonged to a prestigious family with a long history, they were only famous without much money. Therefore, French often deceived women to take money from them. As a result, he encountered a Yandere who threatened to commit suicide if he dared to break up. French intended to stop her but accidentally killed her instead. The woman's brother, Jake, used this to blackmail him into engaging with Raeliana to swindle the Baron's fortune. For his future, French had no choice but to agree. On the other side, Raeliana woke up from her unconscious state, feeling utterly helpless as neither heaven nor earth responded to her calls. She threatened Jake that if he killed her here, he would not get a penny. However, Jake did not care and drew a dagger, aiming it at her face. Raeliana was furious inside but had to bow her head under the roof. Later, when Jake mentioned his sister's situation, Raeliana thought he might have some conscience and tried to persuade him to turn back. But this man was only interested in money, and his sister's death meant nothing to him. Just then, the carriage wheel broke, giving Raeliana a chance to attack French and then jump from the carriage to escape into the woods. She didn't understand why she was so unlucky to have died and been transmigrated, and now people were constantly trying to harm her. Regardless, she was determined to survive. Raeliana tore her dress to find an escape route. Just as dawn was breaking, a hand suddenly reached out from behind. It was Adam. Raeliana breathed a sigh of relief. At the same time, Jake also caught up. Facing such an enemy, Adam didn't plan to hold back and could send him to his death with just one word from Raeliana. But Jake clearly knew that Raeliana, with her personality, would not dare to kill casually. Although he was destitute, as a noble, he would at most be imprisoned for a few years if caught. At that moment, Jake pulled out a bottle and sprinkled a secret potion on Adam's sleeve that could lure monsters. The next second, a huge monster appeared, pushing Raeliana to the edge of a cliff, and she accidentally fell off. In that instant, Raeliana recalled the despair of being pushed down the stairs in her previous life. Raeliana thought she was going to die this time, but surprisingly, Winet caught her. Seeing him drenched in sweat, she knew how worried he had been. Raeliana urged him to go and save Adam, but Winet wasn't worried at all. The next second, the huge monster fell to the ground, thoroughly dead. Raeliana's pupils trembled in shock. How could such a tough guy be killed like this? At the same time, other knights arrived and captured Jake, who was trying to flee. Winet ordered the knights to search the forest, and soon they spotted French. Hearing this, Raeliana took Winet's gun and fired several shots at French, approaching him step by step like a villain. "Run, weren't you capable just a moment ago?" A bullet hit right in front of French's crotch, and Winet and the others behind him were stunned. They hadn't expected Raeliana, who usually seemed so gentle, to be so fierce. On the way back, the two shared a ride. Although Winet's comments were often unpleasant, Raeliana was still grateful for his rescue. As she fell asleep leaning on him, Winet felt very confused about his feelings for Raeliana. The thought of her getting hurt made him furious. So, he ordered that after Adam returned, Jake and the other man should be dealt with immediately. The next day, Raeliana woke up to find herself not only sore but also lying next to an undressed Winet, which terrified her. She quickly asked about what happened last night, but to her surprise, Winet said that she had been very forward. Raeliana got out of bed to leave, but when she opened the door, she saw Adam standing there and pitifully asked for help. However, Winet ordered Adam to bring her over. The next second, Adam jumped out the window, and Winet was furious. He couldn't believe that Adam, who usually obeyed him, dared to elope with his woman. Just then, the butler came to inform him that the Earl was visiting. Winet said he had no time for guests and told them to leave the way they came. He then called the knights to capture Adam, who had eloped with Raeliana. The butler thought Winet was being childish but could only agree without expressing his opinion. Meanwhile, Raeliana wanted to take a bath, so Adam took her to the maid's exclusive bathroom. After bathing, she changed into a maid's uniform, which made her unrecognizable. Hearing that Adam was hungry, Raeliana decided to get some food from the kitchen. Unbeknownst to her, the news of her elopement with Adam was already known throughout the estate. The head chef, thinking that Winet would be jealous, caught Raelina in the act as she was about to take some bread. She claimed she was a new maid and had come to the kitchen because her mistress was hungry. The chef believed her and even prepared a chocolate fondue for her. Raelina used this to bribe Adam for a quiet place. Thinking that no one would come to the study, she decided to find a book to read but ran into the male second lead, the Earl. Upon learning that Raelina had taught herself the complex and obscure Krypton language, the Earl excitedly took her hand and invited her to join the academy. Suddenly, Winknight's mocking voice about her attire came, and Raelina angrily called Winknight a pervert, telling him to stay away from her. Winknight knew why she was angry and explained that it was all a misunderstanding and that he had done nothing. Raelina's back pain was purely because she had fallen asleep on horseback the previous day. Seeing Winknight sincerely apologizing, Raelina did not want to entangle with him in such an awkward manner. Just as she was about to leave, she was suddenly pulled back. Winknight unexpectedly kissed the back of her hand, causing her to blush with shyness. She asked him, "What are you doing? Why are you so skilled at seduction?" Unable to resist, Raelina blushed, forgave him, and hurriedly left. The Earl, who had been watching, was dumbfounded, seriously suspecting that Winknight had taken the wrong medicine. If not, it could only mean that Winknight had truly fallen for Raelina. Hearing that their daughter had almost been kidnapped, the Baron and his wife visited the Duke's mansion to offer their comfort. Winknight assured them that there would be no next time. Jake and another person were thrown into the kingdom's most secure prison, never to be released in their lifetimes. The next day, Raelina put on a wedding dress and rode in a carriage with Winknight to hold their engagement ceremony. Remembering that in the original story, Winknight's official partner was his friend Beatrice, Raelina felt conflicted, as if she had stolen someone else's life. After the engagement ceremony, Raelina collapsed on the bed. When she woke up, she found herself on a ship. It turned out that Winknight had brought her there to enjoy the fireworks that evening. With the atmosphere just right, Raelina shared her thoughts with Winknight, believing that since French had been dealt with, there was no need to maintain a sham marriage. However, Winknight expressed his hope that she would stay by his side until she no longer found him useful. The flicker of emotion in Raelina's heart instantly vanished. She asked Winknight if he had ever loved anyone, and upon receiving a negative response, she smiled confidently. "You will definitely fall in love with someone." At that moment, fireworks ascended into the night sky. Winknight, watching Raelina under the lights, couldn't help but reach out to touch her. The next second, Raelina suddenly stood up, her gaze falling on a blonde woman in the crowd. Could it be Beatrice returning? Soon after, the Marchioness sent a letter. In addition to the invitation, she was looking forward to seeing Raelina at the Monster Subjugation Festival, a traditional event hosted by the main country, held at the Sigrid Mountains. Ladies attending needed to prepare handkerchiefs for knights, who could then present their hunted game to a lady of their choice. Winknight had never accepted a handkerchief nor given his game to anyone. Raelina held no hope for him. After finishing her embroidery class, Raelina passed by the study and found Winknight sleeping on the sofa. She couldn't help but get distracted, recalling the events of the original story where misunderstandings brought them together, and they gradually fell for each other. Wanting to change the doomed ending but not wanting to interfere with their romance, Raelina wrote a letter to Beatrice, hoping she would return to the country early. However, for some reason, the letter was returned. Unsure of how the story would unfold, Raelina was deep in thought when Winknight suddenly woke up, grabbed her face, and accused her of the improper act of watching someone sleep. Raelina really wanted to kick Winknight, especially since he had also spied on her before. Yet, under his threatening smile, she reluctantly apologized. As Raelina left in a huff, Winknight recalled the touch and surprisingly found it not unpleasant. On the day of departure, a maid dressed Raelina in a thick coat, indicating that the Sigrid Mountains were extremely cold, cold enough to freeze someone even in autumn. Thus, Raelina, bundled up, arrived at the venue of the event. Just getting off the carriage, Raelina saw Winknight surrounded by a group of rich young ladies, feeling slightly cuckolded, yet her heart remained calm. Then, Ensley approached, took her hand, pressed it to his forehead, and knelt on one knee to swear allegiance to her. It's said that when girls get handsome, men don't stand a chance. Raelina found this quite reasonable but regretted not having a handkerchief ready for Ensley. So, he took a strip of fabric from her clothing as a token. After Ensley left, Winknight came over to ask if she had forgotten something important. He wanted a handkerchief. Unexpectedly, Raelina ignored him and prepared a handkerchief for Adam behind her. Winknight, feeling jealous yet still smiling, said if Raelina hadn't prepared one, he would take it himself. Annoyed, Raelina decided to make it difficult for him, reminding Winknight not to forget his manners. The next second, Winknight took her hand and swore an oath, leaving Raelina completely resigned. Indeed, The shameless always have the upper hand. She reluctantly pulled out a handkerchief embroidered with a dove and fruit. While the one given to Adam featured a flying dragon, Adam, puzzled, asked, "Am I supposed to catch a dragon now?" When the knights went hunting, Raelina, led by Vivian and her wicked entourage, was pinned down. They mocked her lowly status, only attending the hunting festival because of the Duke. They mentioned that Winet never gifts his game to anyone, not even to his fiancée. If Raelina were truly his fiancée, she'd be heartbroken. Fortunately, she wasn't and responded cheerfully that Winet had accepted her handkerchief. Unlike some who couldn't give theirs away even for free, Vivian, enraged, was speechless, and her companions quickly made excuses to send Raelina out. Thinking it was over, the wicked trio intensified their efforts by splashing red wine on her. Raelina, tired of dealing with brainless people, went to change her clothes. By the time she returned, the first wave of knights had come back and presented their game to Vivian. Then, Ensley rushed in, looking disheveled, giving Raelina a bad feeling. Thinking something had happened to Winet, she was about to organize a rescue when the spoiled young ladies pointed out the window, screaming that a mountain was moving. Raelina rushed to see, but it wasn't a mountain but a three-headed monster. Winet extravagantly claimed he wanted to hunt a dragon but settled for the mountain's ruler. The Lord, seeing Winknight's trophy, was also shocked. Since he captured the leader, Raelina would light the sacred fire this year, much to Vivian's chagrin. Meanwhile, Winet, playing the tender fiancé, regretfully said he didn't catch the dragon Raelina wanted but promised to next time. Raelina was speechless, never having said she wanted a dragon, but seeing Vivian's jealous face, she instantly played along with Winet, flaunting their affection and taunting Vivian. Back in the room, Raelina confronted Winet and learned it was all because of the handkerchief. His attitude was just teasing her. If not for the occasion, she would have vented her frustration with a pillow. At that moment, Winet began to undress and asked Raelina if she wanted to stay and watch. Raelina had never seen such shamelessness and turned away in anger, only to be teased for having voyeuristic interests. She stepped forward, covered his mouth, and told him that watching him sleep was her fault. But men who hold onto others' embarrassing moments are disliked by ladies. After lecturing him, Raelina turned and walked away, oblivious to Winknight's silence. Meanwhile, the Earl came to the room to ask Winet what he really thought about Raelina, noting that he had never before given away a monster at the hunting festival. Winet claimed he had no particular thoughts, but the Earl did not believe him and further questioned what would happen if he himself got close to Raelina. Winet threatened him to be mindful of his status. At the same time, Vivian couldn't swallow her pride. Born with a silver spoon and always pursued by men, she had fallen in love with Winet and, after being rejected, spitefully accepted a proposal from the crippled king. She had hoped to stand on the sacred fire platform this year to mock Winet for his poor judgment, but Raelina unexpectedly interfered. Previously, a mysterious woman had given Vivian a gemstone, claiming it would fulfill her wishes, so Vivian secretly placed it in Raelina's luggage. Elsewhere, Chief Priest Wade asked Pope Heike to attend the sacred fire ceremony, as the temple was facing severe financial difficulties. Without additional donations from the nobility, they might not survive. Heike's appearance would make the nobles grateful and willing to donate, but Heike found the nobility both whimsical and stupid, showing interest only in theological studies and unconcerned about the temple's bankruptcy. He told Wade to leave him alone and not disturb him. Raelina said goodbye to Winet and arrived at the temple with her escorting knights. Before the sacred fire lighting ceremony, she needed to purify herself, including taking baths 3 times a day and eating specific foods for detoxification. Forced to eat terrible food, Raelina went to the courtyard to clear her mind and saw a bird fall into the water. She picked it up, only to hear Heike above saying that this bird could only survive in the cold temperatures of high altitudes and would weaken and die in the temple's eternally spring-like environment. Despite this, Raelina, who never believed in fate, insisted on placing it outside the temple's barrier. Seeing the bird motionless on the ground, Heike remarked that it was its fate, which reminded Raelina of her past life's high-altitude fall. She then held Heike's face, asking the child to be quiet. Infuriated by her impudence, as he had lived for 150 years and had never encountered such rudeness, Heike was about to reprimand her when the bird suddenly flew into the sky, illustrating that one should not give up immediately. Watching Raelina's departing figure, Heike became somewhat interested in her and instructed Wade to find someone, but none resembled her. Frustrated, Heike told Wade to get a clear look at the woman's face. The portraits made it impossible for Wade to find her. Wade secretly complained about the old man, suggesting he might be reaching the age of Alzheimer's. Since Heike saw no use in him, he decided to search on his own. Meanwhile, Raelina decided to fight against the temple's terrible food to the end. She pleaded with the nun to let her off just this once, or else she wouldn't make it to the sacred fire lighting ceremony. Knowing the power of the terrible food, the nun suggested that Raelina could copy scriptures instead. When she looked up, Raelina was already gone. In the library, the half-translated third holy scripture was on the table, and Raelina, who came with her own translation feature, quickly finished the job no matter the language. On the other hand, after wandering around for 2 days without finding Raelina in the temple, Heike decided to go back and continue translating, only to find that someone had already taken over the job. Seeing Heike's displeased face, Wade immediately apologized. To his surprise, Heike was very satisfied with the manuscript and asked him to find the person responsible. That day, they followed a butterfly and found Raelina speaking fluent sacred language. Heike was so impressed that he publicly announced he wanted to take her as his disciple. Only then did Raelina realize that this impolite child was the Pope of the temple. She had thought the Pope would be an old man, not someone overly young. Raelina quickly apologized to Heike and tactfully declined his offer, joking that it wasn't fun outside. Why stay and suffer copying books? Heike thought he had misheard, and was even more surprised by how quickly Raelina slipped away. After a restless night, Heike harassed Wade early the next morning, asking why Raelina didn't accept. Although Wade really wanted to criticize him, he explained reasonably that Raelina was probably under pressure. He advised Heike to be more approachable. Heike said he understood and immediately opened the gate to the Holy Kingdom. Meanwhile, Raelina changed her clothes and met Winet at the temple entrance. She had lost a lot of weight, which left her speechless. Drinking that stuff every day, even an 800-pound person would lose weight. Later, they went to the square and saw the Holy Knights marching uniformly from the gate. It was rare for the Holy Knights to appear in public. Their sudden presence was puzzling. Heike, surrounded by a crowd, walked down the steps, his prestige soaring. He thought this would definitely make Raelina understand what kind of important person he was. However, Raelina looked displeased. She wanted to keep a low profile. After all, remembering what Wade had said, Heike had a sudden inspiration. He recalled a member of the Council of Elders in the Holy Kingdom who always boasted about his descendants and decided to emulate him. "Let me be your grandfather," he said. Raelina was taken aback and very tactfully declined. Wade stepped in to mediate, then asked Heike why he did that. Heike said if he weren't so old, he'd prefer to be a father. "Good heavens, preaching to the choir. You really are something else," he remarked. Seeing Wade criticize himself for being too abrupt, Heike retorted, "Wasn't it you who told me to be more approachable?" Wade felt a heartache, finding it hard to have a harmonious conversation with him. Seeing the situation deteriorating, Raelina was about to sneak away when Winet called out to her. "Really? Such a tactless man." Suddenly, her hair accessory changed color, showing signs of an impending explosion. Winet called out to Raelina in alarm. Just then, Heike paused time, removed the gem accessory, and reset it to its initial state. At the same time, he shed his childlike appearance and transformed into a handsome young man. Afterwards, Heike told Winet that the gem was called a crystalline stone, which was rarely owned due to the Holy Kingdom's export restrictions. Furthermore, the crystalline stone absorbs sunlight, causing it to explode. Realizing this was a premeditated assassination, Winet's eyes filled with coldness. Heike, who never liked such people, questioned his relationship with his granddaughter. Winet, disliking his possessive wording, emphasized that he was Raelina's fiancé. The atmosphere between them became extremely tense. However, Wade, upon hearing that Winet would sponsor the temple, immediately treated him like a VIP, almost kneeling and calling him a financial backer. That night, Winet entered the purification pool, completely losing his usual composure due to Raelina's daytime attack. He repeatedly asked Raelina if there was anything she hadn't told him. Raelina, not wanting to say more, was about to leave when Winet grabbed her. Feeling the strong grip on her wrist, Raelina pushed Winet into the water and asked him to calm down. Duke Winet. This act was clearly out of line. After cooling down, he apologized to Raelina, saying, "I just thought I might lose you, and I almost went crazy." Raelina was shocked, but her heart couldn't help fluttering. Could it be that Winet liked her? The next day at the sacred fire ceremony, Raelina forced herself not to care about Winet. They were just contractual partners, not soulmates. This thought greatly relieved her, but Heike soon became a nuisance. In front of everyone, he insisted on Raelina being his granddaughter, refusing to give her the torch unless she agreed. Raelina was exasperated and eventually had to agree. As the ceremony concluded perfectly with the lighting of the sacred fire, Heike wanted to leave with Raelina, but Wade clung desperately to his leg. Raelina, fearing being entangled by him, quickly boarded a carriage and left. Elsewhere, Vivian, upon learning that Raelina was safe, threw a tantrum in her room. Her brother Justin, hearing the noise, pushed the door open only to find Beatrice, the original female lead, also in the room. Back at the Duke's mansion, Raelina secretly speculated about who wanted her dead. Seeing her lost in thought, Winet approached and suddenly suggested doing something more interesting, thinking it was something inappropriate for children. It turned out he just took her on a major shopping spree, buying all the jewelry in one go, which was not something an ordinary person could do. Among them, a necklace named Mermaid's Tears was incredibly valuable, leaving Raelina overwhelmed and puzzled why Winet was suddenly so gentle. But one thing was certain: since the incident in the purification room, she had become increasingly concerned about Winet. The two spent the entire day out on a date until evening when they returned home. Suddenly, the butler found Winet, indicating that the palace needed him, and he quickly left the Duke's mansion. Meanwhile, the maid prepared for a vacation and specifically warned Raelina not to look into the mirror in the back room of the West Wing, as a previous maid had seen a ghost in it, and it was said that once you make eye contact with it, it would reveal anything. That evening, Raelina went alone to the West Wing to look for the mirror, wanting to ask Beatrice where she was exactly. After finding the mirror, Raelina, suppressing her fear, carefully looked into it. At that moment, the mirror suddenly reflected a pair of ghostly blue eyes. Turning around, she realized it was Winet. Hearing that Raelina had seen a ghost, he said he would bring a priest the next day. Then, he escorted her back to her room door. Just as Raelina was about to enter, Winet stepped forward to stop her, asking if she was afraid to be alone. Before Raelina could answer, he had already pushed her into the room, saying he would wait until she fell asleep before leaving. Feeling embarrassed to just have him sitting there, Raelina was about to offer her bed when Winet picked her up and placed her on it, then lay down on the other side. This made it even harder for Raelina to fall asleep. Winet wasn't planning to sleep either. He was engrossed in a romance novel. Unable to resist, Raelina shared the plot with him, becoming more and more excited as they talked, until Winet suddenly asked, "Aren't you going to sleep?" Raelina instantly quieted down and soon fell asleep, but her hand unconsciously gripped Winet's arm and would not let go, leaving Winet feeling extremely conflicted. The next day, he went to the palace to meet the king and encountered his adjutant, Naomi O'Brien, in the corridor. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Winet was about to go in to see his brother when he was stopped by the countess. Taking a deep breath, she forcefully pushed open the door and burst in, criticizing the emperor for his ineffectiveness. Initially reluctant to admit it, the emperor had to get up under the adjutant's stern gaze and discuss plans with Winet and the others. Now that the time was ripe, they no longer needed to hide the whereabouts of the imperial seal. Thus, Winet and Raelina's engagement could be annulled. The king thought his brother would be relieved, but to his surprise, he had no intention of breaking off the engagement. The king then realized that his brother had fallen in love. As they parted, he reminded Winet to take good care of his fiancée. Meanwhile, Raelina, upon seeing a newspaper report, suddenly realized that today was the day the original female lead and Winet were supposed to meet for the first time. She rode straight to the cemetery in the suburbs. However, to Raelina's surprise, it was not Beatrice standing in front of the tombstone, but Vivian's brother, Justin. Seeing Raelina's troubled expression, he took off his coat, spread it on the ground, and the two sat face to face, chatting and drinking like long-lost friends. Learning that the tomb where the imperial seal was stored had been robbed, Raelina immediately understood that Winet had moved it ahead of time. With the original plot changed, Beatrice naturally would not come. Suddenly, Justin asked her why she was in such a hurry. Was it to visit a lover? Raelina, unsure how to explain, simply said that the person who was supposed to come did not, causing two people who should have met to miss each other. Justin, understanding immediately, asked if Raelina was in an arranged marriage with a man who had a lover, and now she needed to find that lady to let her meet her fiancé. Upon receiving a confirmatory response, Justin said he couldn't understand why. If they had missed each other, it meant they were not destined to be together. She didn't need to step aside, as one should be responsible for their own life. Enlightened by his words, Raelina said goodbye to Justin and returned to the duchy. However, she caught a slight cold from the wind on the way back and couldn't help sneezing, causing an uproar in the mansion. They wrapped her in a blanket and made her a special cocktail to treat the cold, but drinking it did not make her feel better. In fact, she even developed a high fever. At that moment, Winet returned from outside. Seeing her without the strength to do anything but sit, he directly picked her up, intending to take her back to her room. On the way, Raelina remembered the matter about the imperial seal and wanted to ask him why he hadn't annulled the engagement, but her mind was a mess, and she couldn't manage to ask. Instead, on impulse, she grabbed Winknight's hand. "I don't know why, but I've started to care about you recently." Suddenly, Winknight leaned in close, saying he would cure her cold. And his method of treating the cold was very special. That was to pass it to the other person. Winknight bent down and kissed her. The moonlight shining through the window enveloped them, giving off an especially gentle aura. Unfortunately, when Raelina woke up the next day, she remembered nothing. Seeing Winknight sneeze, she even took pleasure in his misfortune. It seems this couple still has some friction to smooth out. Why Raelina ended up at the Duke's mansion, this is where it all ends.